everybody. Thanks for having me. Some of you may know me, and I've shared my own personal story many times before at various forums. So tonight I kind of wanted to take a different tact. It's not often that I get to speak in my own hometown, so I wanted to take this opportunity, and I promise I won't preach too hard or for too long. But I wanted to, even though I am talking to the converted, really introduce something that's important to me and my values, and introduce it through the lens of the zebra effect. Nini mana, everybody. So this is me. I'm a single mum, a climate advocate, a nature lover. I'm a STEM alumni from Flinders. I act as a global speaker for women in climate and do a bunch of stuff to really advocate for gender equity in business decision making. My company, it was founded a few years ago, Val.Ai, really with the purpose of shifting economic systems. We've won a bunch of awards, the UBS Global Female Founders Collective, the Global Open Finance Challenge, Winnovation Awards, and I personally have a Prime Minister's Award for Community and Business Partnership for work between shared value partnerships with corporates, governments, community and non-for-profits. Thank you. So the why for Val.Ai is really about how do we embed climate action into our economic systems. And this matters because if we can't shift the lens of climate to be something that matters across our financial systems, then we won't be able to see the actual behaviour change that we need to address climate action at scale and pace for the global goals, but also before we reach our tipping points. We really act to empower our clients to measure, manage, retrofit and de-risk homes and residential assets. We provide digital products that delight, but most importantly, we kind of supply greenhouse gas emissions data to the big corporates, so global reinsurers, insurance agencies and banks, because currently they need to start reporting on these metrics and being held accountable for them. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about how that actually trickles down into our state, into your businesses and also into your households. So I like to call this the zebra effect. I haven't trademarked it, but maybe I will. This is really going to explore how adopting zebra principles, environmental and social governance frameworks, and also aligning everything we do in our business to the Sustainable Development Goals can benefit our companies and, more importantly, our state. But I just kind of want to start with you thinking about it from an intrinsic perspective. If you put your hand on heart and read what's on the board, what really is the first action that you could take if you didn't have any fear? So let's talk about the unicorns in the room. We really do have this conventional wisdom in our business world where it's dominated by the unicorn effect. Those mythical creatures that are in the business world and they're purely there to make profits, dynamic profits. They celebrate the rapid growth, their expansion, and then also that pursuit of unicornhood is really put on all startups as that's what success looks like. But of course, what we tend to overlook with unicorns is those unintended consequences that have occurred to our planet as a result. So we're talking income inequality, resource exploitation, injustices on a social scale. But I want to say that there is an alternative that we should be talking about, something that can help us reach a just transition over the coming years. This concept of the zebra really aims to address climate change, economic inequalities, but also simultaneously ensuring that we move towards sustainability that ensures that nobody, no household is left behind in the next few years. So understanding a zebra company. In that world of unicorns, there are those zebras that have heart and valuing purpose at the heart of everything that they do. They have sustainability that sits alongside profit. So in that world that is dominated by the unicorns, those high growth startups, they're all valued at over $1 billion. Zebras, they're quite often overshadowed and overlooked in the media, but they do exist. I'll give you some examples tonight. And also, I really want to look at how do we envisage and ensure we're creating more zebras. So I'm an AI company, so I jumped into ChatGPT. If you ask what a zebra company is, it's going to say businesses that have the capacity to influence the purpose landscape because of their economic power, their innovation, their ability to shape and shift community behaviour, and the impact of their decisions on society, the environment, and also the global economy. As such, they have the potential to drive the positive change we need and contribute to a more purposeful and sustainable world. Ultimately, it's about good corporate governance being able to drive societal opportunities for all. These are zebra companies from my perspective. They prioritise not just profitability and hypergrowth, but also purpose and sustainability. They aim to make profits while creating positive impacts on their local society and within the environment that sustains them. So unlike unicorns that often chase all that explosive growth at any cost for investors and investor relations, zebras focus on building sustainable, long-term businesses that enable support for their business, for their staff, for the communities that their staff reside in, and for the society as a whole that sustains them. Who gives a crap? A great homegrown toilet paper company. They use sustainability and upcycled, recycled materials. They've reduced their carbon footprints. They're pledging 50% of their profits to align to social outcomes that their staff are valuing. So to date, over $13 million of their profits have gone towards projects across the globe to ensure that everybody has access to sanitation. Let's not forget though, that has actually left $13 million worth of profit for their shareholders. The company and its shareholders show the leadership that's needed, that when you align business goals with a greater purpose and impact, everybody benefits. So the SDG goals, why do they matter? Yes, there's 17 sustainability goals. It's really a universal blueprint. So for people unlike us who already know about them, have heard about them before, they're a really good business action to be able to put in front of people that haven't heard or are unsure of what the values are they should align to, because it can be a guiding light to help you decide what your team value. Unilever, another great example of a unicorn who then became a zebra. They're behind kind of those favourite brands that you might know of, like Vaseline or Dove. They're not about profits anymore because they've completely shifted their business strategy towards the SDG goals. So in Australia, 100% of the electricity from any of their buildings and resources is now renewable. All their paper's now responsibly sourced, and they've now been certified this year as a B Corp, which is a massive undertaking for such a large entity to be able to do. They've aligned to the SDG goals and are still driving an excellent profit. So as we all here today strive towards that sustainability outcome, we have to really ensure that nobody is left behind in our transition economy. We're really looking at shifting our economy to a green economy, but we have to ensure that we're safeguarding livelihoods in the process. Leadership means in your own business, in your own board, in your own company, in your own team, but also in your own community and within our state and government. We need to ensure that economic growth is also tied with societal equity for the people that are here, meaning that the SDG goals are not about us applying our values lens on other countries where they've still got more growth to do, but we should actually be turning it inwards to our own companies and our own selves to align our goals with where we want to be. Orst is a great example. So they're a Danish energy company. They're entering the Australian market at the moment. They're a really inspiring case because they were one of the globe's largest fossil fuel companies, driven by massive profits. They completely transformed their business operations and are now a global leader in offshore wind and energy. But what was most crucially important is they ensured that their transition was managed so that none of their employees or communities were shut down or left behind in the transition. They actively engaged all their stakeholders to ensure that the just transition meant reinvesting in their current workforce and creating new green jobs for their own economy. A really hyper-local example is Lendlease here. What you may not know is that they have a leading Mission Zero target that was enabled in 2020. So they're on track to be net zero emissions by 2025, but they're going to be absolute zero by 2040. And what's important about that is that's no offsets and no excuses. And they're being really explicit about offsets not counting towards that journey anymore. What they've embedded really in the strategy is that this isn't about sustainability fitting within the sustainability targets of their board. Instead, this is how they're running their business. So let's dive a little bit further into zebras and the zebra company concept. One of the most important things is to remember that zebras really worry about the planet and people first and foremost before profits, because if you value your people and the planet, generally profits will follow. How can we adopt a mindset that sees zebra being embedded in the way in which we buy, invest, nest, and also run our businesses? So, sustainability. We emphasise it, but it's about good business practice. A really hyper-local example would be Finsbury Green Printing. Inclusivity. Zebra companies place diversity, equity and inclusion at the heart of all of their corporate cultures. It's not sitting inside the people and culture as a tick box. They believe in creating opportunities, breaking down barriers, fostering equitable societies, and a really great example from Adelaide is Go-Go events. Profit, driven ethically. This is not about exploitation or unethical resources. It's about being transparent about where you source things, about your supply chain, and asking those questions of anyone within your procurement strategy so you know where stuff comes from and you're comfortable where you're going to source it. Another local example is Gemtree Wetlands and Wines at McLaren Vale. So what's the ESG framework really got to do with all of this, apart from for your board reporting? This is a framework that really guides companies towards sustainability, and it's something that anyone who is a tier 1 or 2 institution right now globally needs to be getting their house in order for. If you are within the supply chain of anyone above you, in terms of insurance, insurability, financial mechanisms or governments, beyond South Australia, then you need to be considering your ESG framework and how you're going to manage it. A great example, if we look at it, is with IKEA. We all know who this brand is, but the reality is in Adelaide, you may not know that they're completely running on renewables. Over the next 2 years, they will have more supply than they need, and they're going to be paying forward that overabundance to the local community and those within their staff network. They've set up really bold internal policy, but what's exciting about the way they're doing it is they're measuring it and communicating it transparently to their staff. And if you ask a staff member what it's about, they can tell you about it themselves because it has a value statement towards them and the way they're doing their business. So a previous life of mine really was about informing government policy and lobbying for climate action. So how can we transform these known ideals from our own businesses and make sure it transposes into good economic policy for our state? It's one thing for me to show these big global brands and being able to say, well, they can do it, but anyone can then, right? Because they've got the funds to be able to drive it. But what's important is we look at ways in which we can bring the small to medium enterprises in South Australia along for the journey. And particularly when we talk to startups, how do we make sure when we're starting and founding new businesses that these value-driven approaches are embedded in the start of a good company like Cobber so that they can continue to do good and be good? We really do need to take inspiration from other places that have already been doing this for a long time, right? San Francisco, Amsterdam, they have excellent policies they've implemented to enable zebra company approaches and also minimum standards for ESG practices. This is a picture of the 30 Arcs in Amsterdam. It's a schooner ship district. It's home to 120 adults, 40 kids. It's prefabricated housing that's sitting on their waterways because they had a social housing crisis. And if you look at their innovative solution, it doesn't really look like a landscape that's very different to the West Lakes or Port Adelaide district that we have. We say we don't have enough room in this state for more good quality, cheap, affordable housing. This is a demonstrable example of how things can be done. What's also iconic is with prefab housing, the largest and most innovative prefab housing company in the Southern Hemisphere was founded in Adelaide. They're based in Adelaide. They've brought all their technologies from Europe here, and they now do all their prefab manufacturing of iconic, rad-looking houses right here, but they're shipping them overseas because the demand is there. So there are things we can learn and we can be doing here as great demonstrable projects that aren't within our reach now. If we're going to embed zebra mindset into our hearts and minds and everything we do, we have to probably get a little bit real about how things actually are in Adelaide. There are biases that exist in our cultures. So we kind of need to face the music and be a little bit passionate about this, as I am. We have to dismantle some of these biases so that we can have a fairer society and we can align the stuff we do when we clock into work with sustainable development goals and principles. We'll talk about patriarchal power structures. They do need to go. The SGDs allow you to face them, see that they're there as a visual within the 17 goals to have gender equity, and name that, which is a really important thing for us to be able to do, particularly here. It's important for us to state that gender does not determine your success, and it shouldn't do from this point forward. This is not about man-hating. If you've seen the Barbie movie, this is not about me being a man-hater or anybody else in this room. What it really is about is saying that the way we've run the world to date, it hasn't worked for everybody. And because of the global climate crisis that we are facing, it's time for us to actually reorganise things. And gender is one of those critical parts for success. What we do know from the data, if I go back to the statistics in my scientific mind, we know that when you have women on boards, particularly older women with lived experiences on boards, you actually get better outcomes, you drive more profit, and you get better results for the local community. Also, when it comes to diverse opinions, if you have 9 people on a board and none of them look like you, none of them sound like you, none of them went to the same school as you, you are actually going to drive better outcomes and more profit quicker. So we do have a real need for a systems redesign. And this isn't something extrinsic that needs to happen somewhere else. This is about living our intrinsic values and making sure this occurs in our own daily practice and the way we interact with other people. This is what the SGDs can really help us do, because they can name those things that we value and we can work towards them together. Really, I want to stir things up a bit and say that this is a radical call to action, and I'm preaching to the converted, but there is a massive disconnect between what we think and how we act in the current Western society. We do need to question the norm, we need to challenge things, but more importantly, we have to be creative in the way that we think about how everybody could thrive if we do things a little bit differently. Whyalla is a really great example here in South Australia when they looked at shutting down and the closure of coal-fired power stations and the massive hyper change of transition economy that's going to be happening in this state to do with hydrogen and solar. It's a really prime example of we have the systems in place to be able to deliver this and transition the local economy and the local workforce, but we should be adding a zebra mindset to this as a state and looking at what additional actions need to be undertaken so that we can have a positive outcome for society and nature beyond the next 2 years of the transition that'll be funded by the government. Engaging stakeholders and community collaboration is probably the most important thing we can have, that local hyper-connection to people and the importance it is for our own wellbeing. But if I want to talk to Professor Doug Mackenzie-Moore, he's a global behaviour change psychologist. He works predominantly in Canada and America, but some of his learnings have really shown that, gosh, action on climate, action on things that matter to you, there is a real disconnect between our values and our principles. We know that 86% of Australians know what climate change is and believe in it, and 68% of them, or 64-point-something% of them actually voted that way in the last election. We know that people understand it, but it isn't actually resulting in actions on the ground in our daily practice. What we also know is when it comes to things like disasters, we tend to think of the good actors and the bad actors, and we can pass judgment and blame as a human being. But ultimately, we see ourselves never on an extreme of any. We are always seeing ourselves personally somewhere in the middle. And if we remain in the middle, we tend to procrastinate because there was no need for us to immediately act. And by procrastinating ourselves, we aren't actually seeing ourselves as part of the solution. What his results have shown is when you look at fostering sustainable behaviour, it's really often about bringing joy to the equation. So this is about creativity, community building, collaborating, and making sure it's hyper-local. We also have to ensure that the reward isn't off into the future somewhere, because we all live right now in 2023 where we have an inbox that's full, climate goes to the bottom of the list, there is always something else that's more important. We have to ensure that whatever incentivisation or triggering action we're going to use to promote a good outcome, you get instant gratification for, because that way you will get the highs that you need in the psyche to continue to do more. A really great example of someone who's living this is Ross Harding. He's a crazy guy with the fish. Ross, he's the founder of Finding Infinity. You can Google him. He's looking at ways in which we can innovatively transform cities. He's based in Melbourne. He and his team at Finding Infinity, they're known for what's called a new normal. What they did is they wanted to be able to show projects of how you can take urban cities and urban city centres and make them completely self-sufficient, a total circular economy. Now, they couldn't raise the funds through government, so they actually went out and loved to party, so had a few parties, raised a bunch of funds. They raised $200 million from global investors over 3 dinners. And what that's allowed them to do is put that capital into action in Melbourne right now. They've got a bunch of wild projects that you can check out online, and they are really, really exciting, demonstrating we can actually do this shit. So for South Australia, what does that mean? Well, we need to measure our impact. We need to all be using the same metrics, and we all need to be talking transparently about it and sharing our successes and all of our epic failures as well. This is a call to action that I hope that you can now go back and talk to your consultants, your stakeholders, your staff, your team, your family, to think about what intrinsically matters to you. I want you to align with the ZEV mindset and make it part of your company's DNA. I want you to challenge the norms and look at the things you want to improve in your daily practice. I want you collaborating locally, going and finding the small SMEs, the people that can do it here, rather than us in Adelaide always going and finding somewhere else that we could be doing business with because they're bigger. I also want you seeking out talent, because we've got a bunch of it here in this city, and most of it is going to the East Coast or overseas when we should be keeping them here. So this is about a brighter and better future for South Australia. It's about adopting the zebra mindset in the way that we do things, but more importantly, how can we create a new normal, and what is that for our state? You're the businesses. It's only you can decide what that future is. So remember, if you feel like you're too small to be able to actually make any difference, I'd like to challenge you and say, I think that means you're just big enough to actually do something pretty radical. So to recap, I want to take you back to that first clear statement and ask, if there was no such thing as fear in your heart, what is the first action that you could take towards answering all of those ideas that are knocking at your heart and being asked to be made? Thank you.